So this is probably going to be my best Dire Maul video ever, and I'm probably going to link this video back to anybody that asks how to do Dire Maul, because this strategy will work on any week with any faction. The deck is pretty transferable. I have got all of my beast leaders now to level 29, which is about 3 levels above my average deck level. And I could probably push these to 30. Wouldn't be able to do 30, I don't think, but could probably push them to 30 if I had the time. But I don't want to waste time for the sake of 150 gold and a bit of Arclight energy. But this Charlga deck is probably the best of the lot for a few reasons, and we're going to go into it. This is going to be an analysis, like I always do, of my gameplay, but I'm going to be using a special tool on my computer because I'm back from South Africa. I'm going to be using a special tool called Epic Pen to do some drawing and really show you tactics for Dire Maul that I hope will help you understand and beat the dungeon before it rotates out this week. But even if they don't, and you don't catch this until after the rotation, this will still help you massively in terms of pushing your tactics when it comes to Dire Maul. So usually I would do my non-talent deck version first, but this time around I'm going to do my talent deck version. If you want to see my non-talent run, including the deck that I run, it's basically this deck without talents. The reason I'm going to do it is because I have a magic little tool for this video called Epic Pen, but I recorded the entire tutorial with no talents without you guys being able to see what I was drawing on the screen, because unfortunately, just due to some ordering of my overlays, you guys couldn't see what I was drawing. So I just sound like an idiot talking all the way through, but I didn't want to re-record it because it took me forever. So what you're going to get is essentially the same tutorial with talents, and then you're going to essentially, if you want to rewatch it without talents, you can later on. But all I need to let you know is that the non-talent version of this deck, doing a level 26 dungeon, is available at the end of this video in the timestamps below. Right, so the talent version of this deck. First off, Charlga. We're running Cavernous Mists because it reduces her to 1 gold. Because Charlga isn't actually that great of a unit, and reducing the costs of the rest of the units, or potentially getting like an extra opportunity for a 1 gold Flame Elemental is great. And for those of you that don't know how Charlga's passive works, think of it like you've got 2 decks. You've got a deck of the minis, and you've got a deck of the costs. Both of these decks are completely randomized. So every time that you use a mini, it gets cycled back into the deck. Every time that you use a specific cost of one of the costs on your minis, which could be any of the costs that you've included here. So for me, that would be a 1, a 2, a 2, a 3, a 3, and a 4. Anytime you use one of those costs, it gets cycled back into your deck too. And of course, don't forget you also have Kobold, which is an extra 1 gold cost that gets cycled into your deck. So that is how Charlga's passive works. So anyway, Cavernous Mists because 1 gold. We've got Bramble on our Quillbore. It's a poison talent, and we are running a very heavy poison deck. We've got Poisonous Claws or Infectious Swipes on Harpies. We've got Bubble on our Murlocs, Bloodthirst on our Execute, Immolate on our Fire Elemental, and a big change from my previous videos is we're now actually running the Poison talent on our Defias Bandits. Why are we running the poison talent on Defias Bandits now? Because everything else is pretty standard, right? If you've seen me run any of these decks before, you'll notice that this pack of, this pack of 5 cards is basically my core for Dire Maul. I use these for all of my Dire Maul runs, even with talents. Sometimes I run Safe Pilot, sometimes I run Prowler. There's some shifts in here that you might see. But why am I running, instead of Picklock, the poison talent? It's actually very simple. 2 poison talents make 2 poisonous minis. This doesn't actually make Quillbore poisonous, so forget him. It actually gives you the opportunity to get a relic called the Basilisk Fang, which is insane and really OP, especially if you're looking to push levels. So that's the reason that I now include 2 poisons, and that is why I think that this video is now going to go above and beyond in terms of kind of the content that we're covering here, because I'm going to go very in depth on tactics for these bosses, but also do a little bit about the relics that I'm kind of aiming for. So let's jump into my first relic choice. We have got Beast Chain, the one that increased movement speed. We've got Divine Parchment, which is useless because we never want to play Charlga, and we've got possibly my least favorite one in the entire game, which is Bounty Board. Would be really cool if it was just like all of your tanks taunt, but we already have that relic. This is just like all of your minis taunt, which is not great when you've got stuff like Defias Bandits or, you know, Harpies that you don't want to taunt. So yeah, we go for this, but actually I don't really rate this relic. None of these relics are particularly good, so we're not off to a great start in terms of relics on this run. So, Kreeg. Let's just go a little bit forward. Right. Kreeg. I'm trying to get it in between there, but whatever. So, the two big things that you need to focus on with Kreeg, well, actually the three big things are here. This pack, this tower and the minis that spawn around it, and this chest. So, the mechanics of Kreeg, if you're not aware, when minis drop below a certain health threshold, I think it's 75% or 60% or something like that, they go into a Bloodthirsty, which means they get the Bloodthirst modifier, but they also start attacking anything that's close to them, which includes their own team. We build our deck to kind of cheese this with Execute to try and force the enemies to do most of the work for us. If we were running Safe Pilot, our first priority would be to Safe Pilot this pack, force these Warsong Grunts to go against each other. If the Troll Headhunter is not dead yet, it will be dead after one of these Warsong Grunts dies, but usually the Safe Pilot is enough to blow these up. Because we do not have Safe Pilot in this deck, we have to kind of approach this in a different way. There is a couple of ways to do this. Either you spawn Defias Bandits in this kind of area so the tower can help you proc the Bloodlust. You spawn Murloc Tidehunters so they can kind of get damage done to one of the Warsong Grunts, and if you just get one of them into Bloodlust, it can sort of deal with this pack relatively nicely. You could just straight up execute this pack and get them to start attacking each other straight away. Or you could spawn Flame Elemental in this area as well, and that will deal with them and sort of proc the Bloodlust as well. The optimal strat really is to use one of your cheaper minis like Defias Bandits or Murloc Tidehunters, because you just want these guys to effectively cannibalize themselves. Over here, a Mountaineer pretty much always spawns. If you don't get Mountaineer, I don't know what's going on. The AI is really annoying, okay? You want to execute here to catch whatever minis spawn and the tower to basically force the AI to take the tower for you, right? And take the threat away from the AI going for this chest. So you spawn a Fire Elemental, you spawn your Murloc Tidehunters, I don't know. You spawn something that's going to contest this chest. I usually try and go for Fire Elemental. The AI will not spawn any more minis around this tower until you've used your Execute. It's really annoying. Trust me, every time that you use Execute on this area, it will then spawn a mini a millisecond after you've used Execute. And it doesn't matter when you use Execute, it always happens, right? That's the first part of this strategy. We'll talk about a bit more once we get into it. So, we drop Murloc Tidehunters here. We get Fire Elemental straight here. Murloc Tidehunters with Defias Bandits as well. And look, watch this. Watch this. I'm waiting. Look, did you see that, right? As soon as I dropped it, and it happens every time, another Mountaineer gets dropped. It's the most annoying thing in the world. But luckily, these guys have essentially cannibalized themselves. I'll drop Charlga, one of the few times that I really actually do like Charlga. We're going to proc the bear's Bloodlust, and then pretty much everybody just starts attacking each other here, including the Huntress. We just want to get these guys to start doing the work for us. We didn't really get the start that we wanted on this tower, but it's not a big deal. The reason it's not a big deal is we've kind of defended our base for the most part, which is the most important thing here. We're going to send Murloc Tidehunters at these Ogre Magi's again. We're not that bothered. We just want to get as much damage done to them as possible. And our tower, even though it will take some damage, it should be able to clear this up. We can also spawn Defias Bandits, which I decide to because I'm taking a lot of damage here. But frankly, once you get past the first two towers, you are never going to take any more tower damage in this game. That's why you can, and I'm going to pause here. That's why you can sacrifice base HP at the start of the game here to essentially give yourself a stronger footing to take the towers. Why? Because once you've got this tower and once you've got the other tower, it is very hard to lose them with the strategy that I'm going to show you. So I'll talk about that strategy once we actually get these two towers down. In fact, actually, I might talk about this strategy now because I think I'm about to do it. Execute is really good on this level for as I mentioned at the start. But the second reason is once these 2 towers are down, there is only 2 spawn locations that Kreeg is going to use. It's going to be this one or it's going to be this one. And if you execute either of them, it's going to send the minis into a Bloodlust, and Kreeg is just going to attack them. And they're also going to attack Kreeg. And essentially, render them never pushing this way. They're going to render them useless. Anything that spawns, especially if it's Warsong Grunts, will then start attacking, and you'll just have a big, massive clump of enemies that get stuck here and here. And it allows you to attack Kreeg for free, and your base is never going to be threatened. So that's why this strategy is pretty good. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to use it straight on that bear. You can see that Ogre Magi is kind of caught up for the time being, gives us time to react. We've got 2 Ogre Magi currently going to town on that tower, but they are now going to start attacking each other. Another reason that we like Defias Bandits as well is because they actually, on this level, can, with the Poison Relic, proc that particular, that Bloodlust threshold, which basically then means that for like a very cheap mini, and I know for Charlga, that the context of a cheap mini is kind of irrelevant, but specifically for Charlga, like, you want all of your minis to be somewhat useful, right? So that's why specifically Charlga. Here's the best people to use execute on. It's those Warsong Grunts that spawn. They're annoying to deal with without harpies, and so if you just execute them straight away, it just means that Kreeg starts doing a big bit of work for you. Anything that spawns behind those Warsong Grunts is also going to start taking damage, and often you can kind of set a chain reaction of Bloodlusts off, which is great. We now have both the towers, so it is simply a case of just looking for very good execute opportunities, ensuring that we're continuing to take the gold wherever we can. And even if our Warsong Grunts are not going to attack Kreeg, it's just about stopping them from actually threatening the majority of our units. And then we're just really going to be dropping Harpies, dropping Quillboars, dropping Flame Elementals to go and deal damage to Kreeg wherever we can. And if we get to a sufficiently low enough place where we're at a low enough percentage on Kreeg, we're probably just going to straight up execute Kreeg, which I probably could have done here. We definitely didn't need to do that Kobold. Getting the execute on Kreeg gets us the win. And that was relatively simple, right? Hopefully you guys have been seeing the drawing that I've been doing. And here we go. Right. It does not matter what these two are. We've got Basilisk Fang. Your minis poison lasts twice as long and deals twice as much damage. Absolutely broken. It is a fantastic relic, and I would recommend that you take it if you're running these particular talents. Now, I'm just going to double check whether I lost this Immol'Thar or not, and I would rather talk about the one that I won, because I think if I lost it, I probably just wasn't paying attention because I was recording this as I was doing something else. But give me 1 second. I actually drew the first one, so that's even more annoying. Not worth I don't want to talk for 4 minutes for a draw. Right, Immol'Thar. There are 2 main tactics for Immol'Thar. There is trying to go for this side tower, or there is just straight up down towards this meeting point and attack him consistently from this direction. Both are very valid. Taking the side tower requires you to use execute on the side tower. It also requires you to have a good setup, usually with Flame Elemental getting towards that tower, or Harpies or something, but it just requires you to invest that little bit extra resource. The reason I don't like going for this tactic is because, to be completely frank, it can just go wrong. It can go wrong with like Ogre Mages spawning, Huntresses spawning. You end up using a lot of resources sometimes for it to get you absolutely nowhere. And even if you do take the tower, the enemy can spawn a lot of stuff straight from here and take it back. So I usually don't like going for that tactic. My main tactic is we use this area to defend, and we just use this area for attack. Sometimes we send fire elementals that we've used in defense down here. We completely try to own this meeting point, and we just launch Harpy attacks. We launch fire elemental attacks, whatever you like, at the boss from this area. So one of the things that also to be aware of is, obviously, as you can see here, whenever you spawn something, these little eyes spawn. You should be aware of this for 2 reasons. Now, cheap minis like your Defias Bandits, you're not that bothered because the AoE explosion is just going to blow up a load of stuff around it, and losing Defias Bandits is not a big of a deal. If I spawned Harpies here and they just all immediately died, that would be a big deal. So if you want to spawn Harpies to attack things, especially around your base, try and spawn them a bit further back, so that if the eyes spawn here, they have to travel a little bit further to get to the minis and they don't immediately die. Same thing for your Kobold, especially here. Don't spawn your Kobold here to go for this gold mine. The eye will just chase it and kill it. It doesn't really matter for this gold mine because it's too far away. So even if you spawn your Kobold here, it will get far enough away. Try and just spawn your Kobold a little bit further back to go for this gold mine. I also say for Murloc Tidehunters, just spawn them a little bit further back. They're ranged, so you really want to spawn them far back, but just a little thing to be aware of on this boss. So Fire Elemental's coming down because there is an Ogre Magi to worry about, and obviously Fire Elemental is a good tank here. We're going to immediately send Harpies towards the boss. There is a Huntress, which basically renders this attack pointless, but we might as well get a relatively even trade with the Huntress, which we do. Immol'Thar very quickly sends our rest of our Harpies down into the dust. Bit of a shame, because that's the kind of opportunistic attack that you want. If I had seen instead a Prowler and a Huntress spawn, I would have gone. That would have been a much more effective attack. But we didn't get the Prowler Huntress. We got the Prowler Ogre Magi spawn. But of course, Ogre Magi would have been equally as annoying if it spawned in the boss. We're going to go for it once more here. Going to use the Harpies, and we're going to get another drop behind the boss here. Instead of going for the Fire Elemental play, because we've got Basilisk Fang especially, we are just going for damage down. But again, Huntress is spawned, so it's basically completely ruined my plan of attack. This is one of the major problems. We essentially had a massively negative resource trade there, which is really annoying. But it just takes one opening with Basilisk Fang. And this is, using Harpies in this respect is the best way to do it. Big issue. We actually got what's it called? What's that thing called? A Banshee that actually got into our base. For those of you that don't know, Banshees deal a ridiculous amount of damage to the base if they actually land on it, and it is painful. So yeah, a lot of damage being dealt to the base right now. We are kind of desperately holding on where we can to just try and sort of make sure that we aren't losing too hard here. We're essentially one hit from death. But this is now a good opportunity. We have just seen a Huntress go down, so we're going to now send a Quillball behind the boss. And even though one of my Harpies is getting chased off, you're going to notice that the damage on the boss will ramp up very, very quickly here. You can see we've got a Huntress and a Prowler spawning on the base. Somehow we got away with it. I think it was the explosion from an eye, but very shortly after that, the poison does end up killing the boss, and we end up getting the win. But what an insanely close fight there. But it just shows you how strong Basilisk Fang is. It can essentially just one-shot bosses for you. And it comes in very handy for the final boss, which we're going to skip to now. I'm going to have a look at the relics. So we've got the healing mining relic, Bloodshot Greaves, which is just, you're never going to activate that. And we've got incendiary rounds, which is just the best option that we've got. So we're going to go for incendiary rounds, I think. Yep. And we're going to jump into the fight. So let me just double check. This is the one that I won. We've got 5 minutes, so it could be one that I lose or one that I won. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, I didn't lose. So we're going to jump straight into it now. So, this boss, and credit to I'm going to just, I wanted to move over to the side a little bit, but credit to a YouTube commenter that I had on one of my videos this week. He kind of helped talk me through, not talk me through, he gave me an idea. Maybe he's seen from another channel, I don't know. But essentially, this lieutenant over here, he's useless. So we don't want him. We only want this lieutenant. So really, what we want to do is make sure that we only commit resources to this side, especially at the start, and this side to either go for this tower. What I like to do is spawn either Flame Elemental here or Flame Elemental here. It doesn't really matter. It will then walk towards these grunts and will eventually go towards this tower. We then want to spawn our DPS units, like our Murloc Tidehunters or our Harpies here somewhere. Really, you want Harpies close to the Wasp and Grunts because they'll take them down before they deal any sizable damage to the base. They will then run towards the lady over here where you spawn a Quillball behind her, and then you can take her down very quickly, especially with poison. You also want to send a Kobold over to this side ASAP because there's a lot of gold to take. That is the start of this fight. Let's just play it through. Yeah, so Flame Elemental over here. We're actually going to spawn Defias Bandits as well. Murloc Tidehunters, like I said. Harpies too, so we're going all out. There's a Kobold, and we just need to get 3 gold ready for our Quillball. So that's a very, very quick start. You basically saw everything that I basically did everything that I said I was doing previously. And now the money is going to start to come through from our Kobold too, which means we're going to get another Flame Elemental on the pitch. We do want to take this tower as quickly as possible. The best support for Flame Elemental in this scenario would be a pair of Tidehunters. But, and this is something that I've learned from doing this quite a lot, this boss takes forever to get there and is often met with quite a few enemies on the road. all of the resources that we just sent up here are going to basically die after they kill this boss. So you want to keep supporting this boss, even if it means sacrificing a bit of damage on this tower, because this tower is quite easy to take. So the reason I spawned the Murloc Tidehunters here, and the reason I'm also going to spawn the Harpies here, is because we want to support the boss. It's more important that we get the boss to the fight, and that's what we're doing by putting Murloc Tidehunters and Harpies in this situation. It does, however, mean, as you can see here, that we don't take this middle tower, and we've also taken a load of damage to our poor boss as well. So not quite executed perfectly, but we're not in a bad spot. We've got some gold left, and we're setting up to try and go for it here. So I'm going to pause it here, because this would usually be a pretty bad spot, and I would actually, if my lieutenant is on this low HP and I haven't got a lot of stuff engaging with the boss, I'd often let them reset the boss and go again. But there is a reason I'm not doing that. And the reason I'm not doing that is because we have Basilisk Fang. There are two real strategies from this point, especially when you're at lower level. The execute strategy, where you basically spawn a Quillbore, usually behind this guy to keep him in combat, and you basically try and execute the boss, but specifically execute the healer. You then want to keep the boss engaged for long enough to cycle to another execute, where you can then essentially kill the healer off. And that means that from that point onwards, any damage that the boss takes is permanent, right? As of right now, any damage that the boss takes is not permanent, because obviously the healer is still in play. However, because we have Basilisk Fang, there is an alternative strategy that we can go for, which is basically just try to DPS race the boss. I would recommend, for the most part, that you try and go for the execute strategy. It's the reason that we kind of include execute in the deck. It's very powerful for that reason too. There's another good reason that we have execute in the deck, is the Bloodthirsty talent. So this actually just means that execute is not wasted here. Even if I don't want to go for the execute strat, it's not wasted, because I could use it on my Harpies to speed the rate at which they apply the poison, which of course can be infinite stacking and also deal a huge amount of damage with Basilisk Fang. So let's just kind of play this one out and see how we go. Obviously, there is an Ogre Magi there, which is a bit of a big deal, but we still get two of the Harpies onto the boss. And as you can see, we are going to execute the healer, but we do actually get the Bloodthirst on my most important unit, which is my Harpy. And as you can see, Wither is being applied to the boss, so it's not cleaning out my resources super quickly. It's actually taking a while to ramp up, and we have Harpies ready to go again as well if we want to go for that, but it doesn't matter because the poison is stacked far enough already. So we actually went for the DPS race style on that boss, which it doesn't usually happen. And that is my Dire Maul tactics guide. I'm now going to show you the non-talent version, and it's going to sound like I'm showing you a load of stuff with arrows, but because I am an idiot, I didn't have the overlay working properly. But I'm not going to re-record it because I'm tired and I just got back from South Africa today, so you can basically listen to me talking as if I was using arrows, and you can imagine it in your head, which is the most important thing. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this talent guide. The tactics are the same, and the deck is the same for the non-talent guide, just without talents and a lower level. Right, so we're going to start with deck. And the deck is this one here. I'm doing no talents first at a even level dungeon or orange level dungeon. And then we're going to do with talents at +2 and a bit levels from my current deck level, which you can see is 25.3. So we're writing on the screen because we're fancy. This is the deck that I'm running. Now, it might look familiar because this package is pretty much used in all of the Beast Leaders that I've used this week. I sometimes included this, but usually this ends up being Safe Pilot, right? So this package here is kind of what I would consider a very core package for Deadmines. The reason being, Deadmines Dire Maul. The reason being is this little guy is a great unbound tank for the second boss, and the first boss can be pretty useful for taking towers and distracting Ogre Mages, which, by the way, in this dungeon, there are loads of. And then we have Harpies, really high DPS unit, incredibly important as an alternate win condition on the second boss. If your Flame Elementals can't get you over the line, just way too good DPS to pass up on the final boss as well. You don't necessarily need them for the first boss because Execute does the heavy lifting there, but we need it for later on. Execute is good on pretty much every level. Execute is good on the first boss for proccing the Bloodlust threshold to get the enemies to attack each other. It's good on the second boss for either chipping down and getting damage down on the boss, or taking the side tower if you choose to go for that route. It's very good on the last boss for killing the healer, but also just for kind of getting that last bit of damage. Fire Elemental It tanks Ogre Magi, which is amazing. It is a pretty solid all-round AoE unit, which is great for killing off some squads. And in general, it's used primarily for its ability to just chip away damage at the second boss. Flame Elemental, if you get Leeching Poison as a relic, can basically solo that boss. We have these little dudes, Defias Bandits. They are really good just as a cycle unit. I think they're a great defensive unit. They just help your tower get those few precious extra seconds to ensure that you're preventing damage, because especially as the higher levels you go, the more it is about preventing damage on your tower than anything else. These little Murloc Tidehunters, these are usually safe pilot, and I would say that in other decks that aren't Charlga, I'm using it usually a bit more comfortable running safe pilot, but in Charlga I like to keep the general deck cost quite low, so I've run Murloc Tidehunters instead. It's just another good range unit for some DPS. It's fantastic. Right, let's jump into the recording then. We'll jump through here. So, relic choice. We have got, as you can see, this is Light Feather, I believe. This is Tainted Power Core, and this is Arcane Crystal. Arcane Crystal in general is quite bad. Unless you're running Safe Pilot, can sometimes be good. Tainted Power Core is very low tier. Light Feather with Harpies is good, so we're going to go with Light Feather. At least I think I go for Light Feather, yeah. So Light Feather with Harpies is fantastic. Why is it fantastic with Harpies? It helps you versus really tough matchups, including Ogre Magi. It can often be the deciding factor in terms of whether your Harpies get the kill on the Ogre Magi. Also can be quite useful for getting those few precious hits in versus a Huntress. So we're going to jump into Stomper Kreeg, and before we jump into it, I'm going to just talk some tactics really quickly. I will stop you again when we get later into the video, but the opening stage is probably the most important stage of this boss, because you need to get a foothold quite quickly. Once you get a foothold, this boss becomes very easy. This pack here is going to be the first one that advances towards your base. You need to encourage them to attack each other as soon as possible. Ideally, you want to get these two guys on the Bloodlust threshold. Now, because we are not running Safe Pilot, usually we would Safe Pilot this pack, and if you're running Safe Pilot, you just Safe Pilot this pack, and it kind of does the job. If we're not running Safe Pilot, we've got a few options. We can use Defias Bandits in this location and just get the tower to proc the Bloodlust threshold. We can use Fire Elemental, which is usually going to deal enough AoE damage, especially in the tower range, to get that to proc. Or we can use Murloc Tidehunters here when they are close to the tower, and hope that the tower doesn't take too much damage before Murloc Tidehunters can proc it, but not optimal. The other thing you could do is execute. You can just straight up execute this pack, and it should do the job. However, execute is best saved around here. Now, the AI is really annoying, okay? And you'll notice this when you use execute. It will spawn a Mountaineer here pretty much all the time. If you use execute, it will then, once you've literally cast the spell, it will then spawn another unit. And it will wait until you've used execute or whatever you're using in this area to actually spawn the unit. It's really annoying, but this chest is important. So you're going to want to spawn, I usually spawn Fire Elemental here. If not, I spawn Murloc Tidehunters and just kind of something that's going to keep either range when you manage to proc these guys. And this is what you want to use the execute for. You execute here to get the Bloodlust going, and you're just going to try and have some stuff that is going to be threatening this tower, but also threatening this gold chest, because that's a really important gold chest to get. So let's jump into the recording. Let's see what we actually ended up doing on this particular run. Now, we have execute in our opening hand. We actually have some. We do not have the best opening hand to deal with these guys over here. The reason being is because, well, we basically have execute, we have Defias Bandits, and we know that we have Quillboar coming up next. So these are all pretty terrible. You do not want to use Harpies here, because Harpies would just get killed by the Troll Headhunter. So we're going to use. All right. There's a reason I did this, and I assume it's because I wanted to save execute. So I actually, when I was doing the runs after this, I ended up actually being more liberal with my use of execute on this pack and sort of using something else to proc the Bloodlust over here. I guess I'm willing to sacrifice the Harpies. It's three cost. I suppose this is my thought process. It should proc. Of course. I'm an idiot. I've got Light Feather. So this is why Light Feather is good. Light Feather means the Harpies are going to survive long enough versus the Troll Headhunter to proc the Bloodlust, which is the most important thing here, and especially before they get in, if they can kind of get it in close within tower range. You can see it's worked out here. They're now starting to attack each other. The Troll Headhunter is not actually an individual threat to this tower, so once the Troll Headhunter gets close enough, we're not that bothered about him. He will just end up dying. We have then managed to send a Fire Elemental this way. We also executed the tower, which you can see did a boatload of damage, and that is great. We're now going to spawn. This is another good situation. So we're going to spawn Harpies to deal with these grunts. These grunts will eventually start spawning near Kreeg, and instead of using harpies or anything else, we are primarily going to use execute. But because we had execute in hand, we had the harpies to take out these guys. We're going to execute this tower and this ogre magi over here because we want these guys to not catch up to our harpies for the time being. And as you can see, we proc the bloodlust and these warsong grunts are going to town. And with light feather, we actually don't even really need anything to tank this tower. Although I say that, the ogre magi does come through, but we trade even with the ogre magi, which is one of the benefits of light feather. And I'm just going to send another long fire elemental down here because this tower is basically done. Once these towers, okay, here's where I'm going to pause again. Once these towers are down and they're yours, he will only be spawning from these two locations, which is fantastic. Why is that fantastic? Because we can execute on these locations. Executing warsong grunts that spawn here or a mountaineer that spawns here means that Kreeg will automatically attack them and the enemies will do damage to the boss for you, which is the most important part of this fight. That is the fight that allows you, this is the mechanic that allows you to kind of cheese it and get past this boss with relative ease. Huntress is a big deal, unfortunately, because it's actually pretty good against most of our deck. One of the units that we do run that is actually pretty solid versus Huntress, especially when we do the talent run, is actually our Defias Bandits. We're going to use, again, so again, you saw the execute that I used up there. He did a double spawn of a, what's it called? He did a double spawn of an Ogre Magi, which the mechanic of this boss is that it will spawn, apart from the Bloodlust mechanic, the mechanic of this boss is that it will spawn 2 sets of Ogre Magi pretty much all the time. And obviously you have to kind of contend with that. That's an extra 10 gold's worth of minis that are being sent at you like consistently, right? This is why we want to use execute. We have another execute opportunity up here. We're going to get the Mountaineer to start dealing damage to itself and dealing damage to the boss where possible. But more importantly, Kreeg is just about also getting Kreeg to essentially clean up the minis that are coming towards us, which kind of then effectively allows us to take these towers with more ease or defend these towers with more ease, or however you kind of want to frame that. So now we're kind of in a good spot because we have the 2 towers taken. It's 2 solid areas of defense. We can keep procking things. We can keep spawning things like our fire elemental, and we're just looking for good opportunities to use execute, which in this situation, still willing to hold on to it because we're looking for a really prime opportunity, which is going to be the warsong grunts. If we can get the warsong grunts out, we're in a really nice spot here. And you can see the fire elemental it's actually doing enough by itself to kind of proc that bloodlust on the enemy minis anyway. So again, waiting for like a good opportunity to use execute. You do want to try and be a little picky with it, and this is an opportunity here. Even if it's not actually attacking the boss, they will just start attacking each other. They'll also draw aggro from anything that spawns on that side as well, which is great because it's kind of allowed our harpies and our fire elemental to draw Kreeg over to the side, and we end up winning, which was pretty good. I mean, there was a little bit of, I think, a bit of a tough time around the second tower there, but it was a pretty good, I think, showcase of how Kreeg is supposed to work. So we're going to skip forward a little bit here. Okay, so let's have a look at Spirit Feather, and then we've got Scroll of Renewal. Okay, right. So, I mean, some people might have used Scroll of Renewal. I think it's terrible. Spirit Feather is okay, but really, we are running a poison deck. We have, well, or at least we will. Okay, let's rephrase that. We kind of run a very heavy poison deck on our talent minis because, frankly, poison is just overpowered versus bosses. So, to give our ranged minis, which includes Charlga and our Murloc Tidehunters poison, we're going to be having essentially a really nice source of consistent poison damage application, which is what we want. So, we're going to go with that. Let's jump into this boss now. So, right. This boss. So, there is, I'm going to pause it. There are 2 pretty solid tactics to this boss. It basically all depends whether you think that you can go for this tower or not. Now, if you spy a good opportunity to go for this tower, and what I mean by spy a good opportunity is, let's say he spawned a Prowler and a Huntress, and you get a really insane value trade with Harpies, and your Harpies don't die, which is quite difficult because of the little eyes that spawn these guys. The Harpies survive. Let's say you Quill Bore behind this, you take this tower really easily. That's great, right? The deck that I'm running is not particularly well set up to take this tower. Usually you need some kind of solid, fast tank. If you're running a Prowler in your deck, that tower is a lot more accessible to you. So basically the 2 tactics are, do you want this tower? Because that tower allows you to spawn minis that can it provides you with more defense, so it gives you a bit more leeway. It's a tougher tactic to pull off, but it gives you more room for mistakes. Or do you want to just basically send shit this way, get the meeting stone, consistently contest the meeting stone, and essentially rely on either Flame Elemental or Quillbore tanking to get you the win? Now, what you'll notice in both of my runs is I just go for this strategy. It's riskier, it's harder to defend from, but it is less likely to go wrong. That's the thing. That's what I would say. This strategy is a little bit more likely to go wrong because you're playing at the mercy of several factors, including what they're going to spawn and, like, if they put a Banshee down and take your tank or whatever, you could just end up losing a load of resources here and lose. So I find that this strategy is more consistent because you're less likely to just randomly lose resources. So that's basically the fight. One tiny thing that you need to know about is obviously these eyes spawn wherever you spawn a mini. It's not too bad for things like Flame Elemental or Quillbore. They're resistant. They will just tank it. Things like Harpies, they will die. So what you want to do is, if you have, let's say there's an enemy mini here and you want to spawn something, do not spawn unless you want to blow the enemy mini up. So low-cost minis, it's okay to spawn them right next to it, because if the low-cost minis are spawned right next to it, then the damage is dealt all over the place. But if you want a mini that you kind of want to protect, so let's say the enemy mini is here. Let's say you've got Harpies, try and spawn your Harpies here. So they have to make a bit of a journey to get to their target, because when the eyes spawn down here, they won't immediately blow up your Harpies, and usually your tower will just take them out. Just a little tiny thing that you need to be aware of. Now, I can't remember if I failed this first attempt, so I'm going to quickly just check before I jump into analysing it. I did fail this first attempt, so we're going to go for our second attempt, which is now. So, let's jump into it. Whenever you're ready, Kinnan. Whenever you're ready, whenever you're ready, whenever you're ready, whenever you're ready. And here we go. Sweet. So, what is this guy spawning? He spawned a long-range Banshee, which is very unusual. I'm not used to the long-range Banshee spawn. Banshees are kind of annoying, but we do have a lot of stuff in our deck to deal with Banshees, which includes things like our Murloc Tidehunters, which are relatively low value. So, why have I just randomly done this already? I haven't spawned a Fire Elemental, I haven't spawned Harpies. Well, we have Poison on our Murlocs, so we're going to go for this strategy because we're just trying to apply as much poison to the boss as possible. You might as well take those opportunities when you get them, and obviously our Quillbore will tank a little bit here as well. Now, I'm not going to spawn the Harpies. Why am I not spawning the Harpies? Well, for two reasons. That Quillbore's nearly dead, so it'll be a waste of Harpies. Secondly, it's the Prowler Huntress time. And my highest DPS units are needed here to kind of basically take out these guys. So I'm going to spawn my Harpies just to essentially try and deal with these guys as quickly as possible, because they are very high DPS units. They deal a lot of damage to my base, and my Harpies are there essentially to get as much work done as possible. You'll notice that I waited to spawn my Kobold. The reason I waited to spawn my Kobold is because I didn't want him to get blown up. Now, as you can see here, I just had my Fire Elemental Bansheed. It's really annoying. It's obviously something that can happen, but we've dealt an absolutely boatload of damage to the boss. So now it's kind of just about defending, and this is where Flame Elemental, I think, comes into his own on this map as well. Not only is he great for offensive opportunities, but versus the Ogre Magi, even versus the Prowler and the Huntress, can essentially defend for a very long period of time. As you can see here, we've got another defense going on with my Harpies, but they got Chain Lightning, so their Spirit Feather kind of died. And you can see here, I'm going to drop another Fire Elemental. We really do not want the Prowler to charge our base. The Fire Elemental will lose 1v1 to the Prowler, but with the support of the turret, it should be enough. And what we actually are just looking to do here is primarily cycle out to execute. We just want to execute the boss one more time. The damage has been done at this point, so we are sort of primarily looking to just get that execute on the board. And as soon as we get the extra 1 gold, we're going to cycle straight up to the boss and use execute. Relatively straightforward. And you'll notice that I did not take the side tower. We didn't go for the side tower tactic. It was purely all the way down the meeting stone side, and then just used our DPS units to get as much DPS down to the boss as possible. Right. So, jump on to the next. So, yeah, okay, right, here, this is interesting, right? So, we have, can't remember what that is, but that's useless. Poisonous Concoction, which is okay. This is an okay relic. Pretty good considering that we've got poison on our ranged minis. We're not running talents in this deck, so it won't help out otherwise, but it works well with one of the relics that we've already got. However, we also have Stranglethorn and Commendation. This is probably one of the best relics in the game, next to things like Stormwind Commendation and Warsong Commendation. Just a very, very good relic. I'm not going to take it. The reason I'm not going to take it is it's going to make the next fight too easy if I take it. Stranglethorn Commendation can basically win you runs by itself, and a lot of people who do dungeons will tell you that the relics are sometimes the most important part of the run. As you know, getting good relics can basically make a dungeon good or not. One of the things that you can do if you're struggling on a dungeon is just to check back the next day and you'll have a different set of relics to choose from. So we're not going to take Stranglethorn Combination because it will make it too easy. Okay, right. This is why this Dire Maul video, I think, goes beyond my other Dire Maul videos. It's because a commenter on one of my last videos this week said, why don't you just like ignore the left-hand lane? Because that lieutenant is basically useless. And I was like, this dude knows what he's talking about. Why do we bother with that lieutenant? Why do we try and split our resources and time it when he's not important? The only lieutenant that is important is this one. And she takes forever to get to the boss. So actually, basically, only concentrate on these two lanes. The only time you ever want to send a unit this way is your kobold to go and get some gold. You'll have access to 1 gold mine for free. You don't want to go send any resources down that lane whatsoever. So what's the tactic for this boss? Well, defend this here. You want to place minis in this zone to defend these Warsong Grunts. Why do you want to do that? Especially if it's Harpies or Murloc Tidehunters. Well, you want those guys to go this way once they've killed the Grunts. So you want to spawn them in this zone so they can go towards this lieutenant. The tactic generally is you want to put a fire elemental in this zone because then it will then go here. You want to put Harpies, Murloc Tidehunters, whatever, Defias Bandits in this zone because then they're going to go walk this way. You want to save your Quillbore because once your Harpies and your Murloc Tidehunters are released, you want to drop your Quillbore behind this lieutenant to ensure that you take it very quickly. You also want to send a Kobold this way as quickly as possible because it has the gold mine with already 2 gold stacked. Once we've got this lieutenant, you want to make sure that you are kind of connecting with your own minis at the same time that the lieutenant is making her way towards the boss. The big issue is that the lieutenant is often spawned, like there's usually like Warsong Grunts that get spawned on this side. So you want to keep sending resources this way until you're pretty comfortable that the lieutenant is getting close towards the boss, and then you want to send your own resources down the middle. Why? Because if you send your resources at the boss without this lieutenant, they will just get basically killed very quickly. And also with the fact that the healer is there, you need to maintain combat if you're going for the execute strategy on the healer. And we'll talk about the execute strategy once we get there. So, okay. So interestingly, I dropped Fire Elemental here. This is also perfectly okay. The Fire Elemental can go towards this boss. I actually have often found that even if you drop Fire Elemental here, it will actually still go towards the middle tower. But if you drop Harpies on the right, they won't. As you can see, I'm going to drop Murloc Tidehunters here as well. We're also going to drop the Harpies in just a minute too. I'm going to drop the Harpies now because the Murloc Tidehunters are already going, and we're going to just send our Murloc Tidehunters and Harpies that way. Looks like my Defias Bandits and my Flame Elementals kind of did enough of a job here to get away with it. And now they're going towards that central tower. We've taken the boss. We're going to spawn another Fire Elemental down the middle. We just now want to take this tower as quickly as possible because we want to be able to support our lieutenant on this side of the map going for the boss. Doesn't matter if we lose that many resources. I would say if I am being particularly picky, you want to just send about the right amount of resources. You don't want to overcommit. And the right amount of resources is one Harpies squad and 1 Quillbore. That actually is usually enough to kill the boss. You don't really need to commit more than that if you don't want to. Going to send Murloc Tidehunters. We now take that tower. This is now the unfortunate thing. We are getting our lieutenant onto the fight now, and we have got a Quillbore who unfortunately has died. We do like to usually keep Quillbore alive as much as possible in this situation, but we've dealt a boatload of damage, and we are now just looking to cycle out towards execute. Why are we trying to cycle out towards execute? Let's just stop and talk about the strategy. You drop something in behind this dude. You execute the boss and the healer whilst the boss is engaged, and then you want to cycle out to another execute. Usually, if you're even levels on your execute, or even if you're just slightly behind, you can get it done in 2. And that will kill this healer, and it will not be impacting the fight for the rest of the engagement, which basically means that any damage this boss takes is then permanent, because that's the biggest problem this guy provides. This guy heals the boss over and over again. To make this effective, these guys need to be engaged. If you stop the engagement, a current fight, this guy will heal himself. So all the damage you've done with your execute is just pointless, which is why you really need to time this boss coming in, because if this lieutenant gets into the fight and she casts Wither or whatever it is that she casts, it will mean that you can stay in the fight with the main boss, the commander, for a lot longer. So we're going to spawn harpies in here again. We just want to keep this fight going. Light Feather is also pretty good for this scenario. We're just going to go straight up and execute the healer. And now this means that any damage to the boss is permanent. And he is withered, so he was very slow DPS. And as you can see, taking a boatload of damage right now from the harpies. We've also sent in Charlga with the poison talent, which is essentially going to mean that we get this nice and easily done without talents. And that is our run without talents, guys. Let's jump over to our run with talents.